All right, so we are on live. We're going to give a couple minutes to get people some time to get online. Let me know once you join us, say hi, let us know. It's Let's Talk Live with HAWM Law, but we have a special edition today for the Diaspora where we're talking about buying and selling property in Jamaica. And we have two very, very, very special guests. So before I introduce them, I'm kind of just gonna give us a couple minutes. We just went live to get followers on, listening, tuned in, because we have very, very important discussion today, and it's going to be very informative. You definitely do not want to miss the Let's Talk Live program today, talking about conveyancing, word that we don't typically use here in our lingo in the US, but it's what we call real estate in Jamaica. It's a conveyancing transaction where we're buying and selling property. We get a lot of inquiries about that at my office because I am licensed to practice law in Jamaica as well. However, I want to get you to the people with the knowledge, the experts in this field. We have Monique Clarke. Hi, Monique. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday morning to be here with us, informing our viewers about this process. And I'm going to give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sasha, for having me. My name is Monique Clarke. I'm an attorney at law, licensed and practicing in Kingston, Jamaica, also residing in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and attending to the needs of the diaspora. I have experience spanning almost 10 years from practicing in Connecticut to Dubai to Jamaica, and looking forward to sharing my knowledge with you all.
Great. And we have Courtney Williams, who is on the ground right now in Jamaica. He is our go-to man there on the island. So introduce yourself, Courtney.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My resume is not as extensive as Monique, but I'm a lawyer. I've been an attorney at law in Jamaica for 14 years. And my expertise includes labor law, family law, land matters, mortgages, etc. I'm glad to be here this morning, and I hope I can actually share some information that will be useful to the people who are actually logging on this morning.
So absolutely, if you worked with our office, and you're doing business in Jamaica, you probably have heard me drop Courtney's name. He is excellent at what he does. He is definitely, a go-to resource for anything that you need in terms of Jamaican law, especially Monique as well. She's an overwhelming amount of information that you can get from these two individuals when you're doing and transacting any business in Jamaica. But today we're specifically focused on land matters, real estate transactions, conveyancing. So can you tell us what exactly is the process that you have to go through to purchase property in Jamaica?
All right, the starting point has to be with finding the property, locating the property. So typically that would be the role of the real estate agent. They would guide you through the process of locating, whether it's land, whether it's a house. They would assist you in that process, in locating the asset. The next step would be financing. Can I afford it? Can you afford it? So you want to go to your mortgage broker and say, okay, I need to obtain financing. And the alternative, if you're going to be paying with cash, you have to present proof that you're able to purchase the asset. So whether it's a pre-qualification letter from the mortgage company or a statement of funds, statement showing from your banker that I have the funds in my account and I can afford this property.
Mm-hmm. Once you've got that in place, you have your real estate agent, you have your kind of pre-funding in place, or pre-approval is kind of what we would call it here in place. Then what next? What do we do next?
I mean, viewing the properties, well, I'll just start to piggyback on something that Monique said, earlier, identifying the property, but not only identifying the property, you have to view the property, you have to know what you're buying. buying real estate in Jamaica is not just buying any chattel. You have to, it's an investment, it's a capital investment that you have to ensure that 5 years, 4 years or 5 years, 6 years from after buying the property, you don't have some sort of regret. You have to look at the neighborhood. You have to look at things like, what the place looks like after a shower of rain. Is there any flooding issue? Is there any issue with the flooring? Is there any issue with leaking? So I want to we have to ensure from the very start, and this is not just a situation in Jamaica, but all over. Ensure that you know what you're buying, because at the end of the day, when you sign that contract, then of course you can't go back. You have to follow through. So the vendor can actually, the vendor will have certain remedies available to him or her to enforce the completion of that contract. So that's very important. Negotiating the price. You have to know what type of price, because the price is very important in terms of setting the stage of the transaction. In Jamaica, a lot of the payments are in fact measured from the price. So transfer tax is measured from the price. Things like mortgages, things like registration of the mortgages is measured from the price. So you have to know that you have the money to complete, as Monique said. You have to. It's not just about trying to get the money.
She bring up a very good point, Courtney, because a lot of us here in the United States, in the diaspora, a lot of them hear about a property because a relative or somebody they know say, hey, there's a property down the street that's being sold and it's a good price. How would you find out if you're getting a good price for a property? Can it be appraised? What's the process for assessing whether or not this is actually a good deal, or I'm being taken for a ride by somebody who is in cahoots with the seller?
Get a valuation, get a reputable value at the value of the place. I mean, there are many companies in Jamaica that are good valuers, and you don't want to use anybody to value a property. Get a value. There are a number of them here, and then they are usually adept. I find in my experience that they are usually adept at sort of assessing, the fair market value of a property. So that's where I would start, really. So
you can definitely get a valuation to determine whether you have a good price. And then you touch on an issue whether the quality of the house is good. What do we do there? Because here in the US, you would go out, you get an inspection, and the inspector would give you a full report on all the issues with the house. That's a similar process for that in Jamaica?
Yes, so you have the valuation company also offers appraisers who can go in, do a very detailed and thorough inspection from the roof to any issues affecting the building, whether it's termites or any sort of issues. So under the same roof, you have the valuation company and appraisers who can go in and do that detailed inspection for you.
Yeah.
And so just asking a practical question here, that if that valuation, is it a valuation that's personal to you, or is it something that your mortgage company will also be doing?
Well, the mortgage company usually ask you for a valuation. So if you're going to use a mortgage, then clearly you would want a valuation. And they usually have a list of valuers that they work with. So you have to ensure that valuation is done by one of the persons on your list.
All right. Well, that's
I
good
want
to
to
know.
share also one additional thing that I think is so very crucial for the potential purchaser to also get is a surveyor's ID report. I cannot stress it enough.
What is that, Monique? I don't even know what you're talking about. So what is a surveyor's ID report?
Yes.
So you want to engage a commissioned land surveyor. So this is the professional that goes out and he essentially checks the boundaries of your property, of the land, whether it's the house or the land itself. You want to check the boundaries to ensure that indeed what you're seeing on paper that you're buying is indeed what is on the land.
Yes.
You don't want to enter a situation of encroaching on your neighbor.
Yes.
You don't want a piece of the roof hanging over onto your neighbor's property. It can present significant issues going forward. So surveyors ID report.
And just to add to what Monique said, it's just not only in terms of, you having a problem with a property that is in breach,
Wow. So if what's the typical timeline we're looking at from the time you've said, I've identified a property and I want to get started to when I will actually get the keys to this property, in a standard transaction that may not have any complications that shows up in the surveyor's report or the appraisal. But if we're looking at your run-of-the-mill transaction, how long does it actually take till we actually close on this transaction?
It depends. It depends. A cash sale is clearly quicker. I mean, there's no middleman, there's no mortgage company involved. I mean, theoretically, a sale can be completed in 30 days in Jamaica. I mean, we don't rank highly on the doing business, sort of index worldwide. But I would say if a mortgage company is involved, typically that time period could go as far as 120 days. Okay. Because there are a number of steps to be completed, especially by the mortgage company before that the money is released to the vendor's attorney at law to complete the sale. So about 120 days, it may extend for many reasons, or it may be sort of lower than that number, depending on that particular transaction.
So you mentioned something that brought to my mind. Something that is not very common in our transactions here in the United States is the use of an attorney, or the requirement that we need to have an attorney in order to actually purchase a property. Can you tell me, or tell the audience really, what's really the difference, so the role of the attorney versus the role of the real estate agent in these transactions, and why do we need both?
Well, Monique spoke earlier about the realtor. The realtor essentially locates the property, and after the property is located, Jamaica, I believe that it's extremely important to have an attorney. For a smooth transaction of the transfer of the property. Well, the attorney in Jamaica is principally responsible for a smooth transfer to the person who's buying the property or the person who's selling the property to the purchaser. Now, if, for example, an attorney is acting for the purchaser, the attorney would be doing certain searches to ensure that the title is free and clear. And what we mean by free and clear is that it can be smoothly passed to the purchaser. Fact is that a lot of people in Jamaica, and it's a cultural issue we have, believe that they can sell and they can't sell. So, for example, if a lady lives with her father at their home and the father dies, she automatically believes that the property belongs to her. And sometimes I've seen it before where people come to my office to say that they're going to sell a property that their father owned, and in your head you're like, then how are you going to transfer? So, a lawyer ensure that can be done. A lawyer will look at the title to ensure that there are no caveats. And of course, I have to use that big word, meaning that there's no dispute as to ownership. A lawyer have to ensure that there's no outstanding mortgages. There are no sort of.
So you're doing all of that search. You're doing the lawyers doing all of that background search. So you don't have in Jamaica what we would typically consider the title company that does insurance of your title. That work is being done by the attorney.
From my perspective, that's my understanding. Yes, and there are certain legal provisions, for example, and these provisions have certain implications that the typical layperson will not understand. So, for example, the time of the essence clauses. What does a clause? What does that clause mean? Things like, as is, you're buying the property as is. What does it mean? Because it sort of goes back to something I said earlier. If you buy a property and then you find a fault after you sign the agreement, I mean, you're basically stuck. You're stuck with that problem. You know, you want to ensure that, you know, if you're interfacing with the government office, it's easier for an attorney at law to interface with the government office, for example, the stamp office, the titles office. The attorney will help you to navigate. The attorney will understand certain processes better than you, understand the fees, understand time frame and stuff like that. It's absolutely way easier to deal with an attorney at law when transferring land in Jamaica.
Absolutely. I want to also add to that, Courtney, that, you know, just how a title is held, you know, an attorney at law would better able to guide you as to if these are the appropriate person, the signatories to a contract. So especially how the title is held, whether it's as a joint tenants or tenants in common, if there's somebody
What does
else,
that mean, Monique? That's a very good point you brought up. What does that really mean for our audience, a joint tenant versus a tenant in common?
All right, so very simply, joint tenant, there's right of survivorship. So if you have two people, one passes away, the person who survives essentially obtains the whole of the title. Okay. And then with tenants in common, each person has a distinct share. So to the example is that if the title is being held as a tenant in common, then you have one or two other persons who are to be signatories to the agreement in order to sell the property. So I can't come, one person cannot come and say, okay, I want to sell. Yeah. But yet there are three other people on the title.
And we know it's a very common issue because, oh my gosh, I hear about it all the time. My grandmother left a piece of land and it's 7 kids. And one person wants to monopolize that issue. How do we deal with that? How do you deal with that issue where one person may be living on the property for so long, but it was left by a grandmother, possibly she has no will, she has, who actually owns that property and can develop it or sell it?
Well, I mean, if there's no will, I mean, the law deals with who gets the property, and that's just it. The fact that we have our intestate laws in Jamaica, which actually dictates, it has a list of people who actually gets property, and the list goes down to goes back to the government. The property can go back to the government if there's nobody alive or nobody available on the list to actually take the property. So that is intestate. If it's a situation where the person left a will, then clearly the provisions of the will prevail. But I mean, there's always what I find the most problems. Sometimes they have problems with wills, but the most problems will come in a situation where there's an intestacy. We have a sort of cultural belief of many things in Jamaica that are not necessarily right. You know, for example, just to switch a bit, that upon divorce, the wife gets 50% of everything, and the husband takes 50%, and that's a myth. That's a myth in our law. That's not how it actually operates. So therefore, you will have people in Jamaica who believe that when daddy dies, then we should get. And that's not necessarily so. So, for example, if there's a spouse, the spouse prevails over the children when it comes to interstate law in Jamaica.
So it's you know, those are things that attorneys like you guys come in to make sure that those things are cleared up before you invest money in either developing the land or attempting to sell the property and things like that. So, but attorneys are expensive. You guys are, you know, not cheap. So what is the cost of this process? What can we expect to pay? What are the fees involved in really buying and selling property in Jamaica, right? And so if I go in to purchase a property, what can I expect as my costs and expenses in such a transaction?
All right, I'll tackle from the buyer side. So a person buying, you know, of course there is the sale price, that which they have to cover in its entirety, and then some attorneys' fees vary. So the percentage can be between 1% up to a max of 3%, and there are instances where there is scope for some flexibility. So, but at the very maximum, it would be 3% of the sale price.
Yes.
Okay.
That's for your attorney's fees.
Yes.
Those are the legal fees. That is correct. So 3%. Some other fees that are shared between the buyer and the seller, we have the stamp duty, which is fixed at 5,000 Jamaican dollars, and that is a shared cost between the buyer and the seller. Then we have the registration.
That law was recently changed in Jamaica.
Yes.
Gladly, I mean, so people are happy.
Yes, we definitely appreciate the government of Jamaica making the transaction process more affordable for people who want to own homes. So we definitely commend them for that. You don't get an opportunity to commend the government all that much, but they have definitely made strides in terms of reducing the transaction costs. And this is one area that we're talking about with the stamp duty, because it used to be a percentage before.
It used to be a percentage before, yes.
Absolutely.
It's no longer a percentage, it's now a fixed fee.
Great. So in addition to the attorney's fees and the stamp duty, what else are we looking at?
So we're also looking at the registration fee, which is 0.5%. And again, this is a shared fee with the seller.
There are also fees that are outside of what Monique just explained a while ago. There are your personal fee, for example, if you are purchasing, you have to get valuation reports. You have to get a survey ID report. You have to if there are mortgages on the property, for example, or if you're obtaining a mortgage, to purchase the property, you have to pay certain fees. Certain duties are payable that you have to interface. You have to pay those fees with the mortgage company. And there are, if you want to do an engineer's report, for example, if you suspect that there's certain issues with the property, you want to do an engineer's report, then you can actually get a report. And those are some of the fees that are important.
So, if you can, just for people listening in, if you look at the purchase price of the property or the offer price and it's been accepted, so you have your contract price, how much percentage above the contract price should you expect to spend in terms of your transaction costs? Can you give me a round ballpark figure? Is it an additional 10%? Is it an additional, 50? Well, it would be a little bit more than 5, but an additional, 10, 15%? What would you estimate is it additional?
Depending on who you are. If you're the vendor, you're going to spend a little bit more. Well, I mean, in terms of fees and costs. The fact is that, for example, transfer tax is payable by the vendor only. I'd say, roughly speaking, Monique, about 10 to 15%.
Yeah,
10 to 15%. Yeah.
So when you're purchasing, don't just look at the cost of the house and that you can afford it, but you're looking to spend an additional 10 to 15% in the transaction cost.
Exactly.
Okay.
Also, the responsibility of the real estate commission for the real estate agent that you utilize to so ably help you find that property, that responsibility or that payment is only done by the seller. Yeah,
and that's 5%. Usually 5%. The realtors I find are kind of inflexible sometimes, but the normal fees would be 5% plus GCT. Sometimes they'll go down to 3%, but it's always plus GCT. So that's a cost for the vendor, as I said earlier. And if you can, not to try to box bread out of people's mouth, so to speak. But if you can, it's better you sell the property yourself. If you can advertise yourself, without the help of. Well, I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying if the property is sellable, by itself, then perhaps it's better to reduce costs as a vendor.
Well, we're about halfway through the program. If you're just tuning in, you are watching Let's Talk Live with the attorneys from Harm Law. We have some special guests today. We have Monique Clarke, who's looking fabulous in green, and Courtney Williams at the top as well. We're talking about conveyancing and real estate transactions in Jamaica. We're getting some very, very valuable information on what to expect, what to prepare for when you go out to buy property. How can our listeners reach you? Because we talked about the role of attorneys here and how important it is, to get a good attorney to handle this process, because it's very critical. You know, it has implications on your future ability to resell the property if there's issues that your attorney has missed. So I have you on here because I know you guys are great attorneys. So tell the audience, while we're here in the middle of the program, for those tuning in, to how they can reach you, Monique.
Reach me on the phone. You can give me a call. That's the best method.
Exactly.
Call my office. You can call me directly. You know, I like to give, you know, clients my direct number. I don't want to feel that it's so difficult to get in touch, you know. So you can call me directly, 954-610-1429. So I'll say that again, 954-610-1429.
And you see it right there on the screen. That's how you contact Monique. She has both her Jamaica and Florida number on there. And Courtney, how can our viewers reach out to you? Tell us how they get in contact with you to handle this transaction.
Similarly, I mean, I'm available on phone also. My number is 853-6587. I only have a Jamaican number. So that's 853-6587 and 876 before that. I'm also accessible by WhatsApp. And, you know, I mean, I often interface with my clients by WhatsApp and also email at cmarkelwilliams@gmail.com. That's cmarkelwilliams@gmail.com.
Absolutely. And if you're working with any of these two fabulous attorneys, you do have the option of working with Harm Law stateside here in the United States to facilitate whatever transactions you guys are doing. We are happy to help to make sure that you become the homeowners in Jamaica, and that us as the diaspora and anyone else listening can get a piece of the rock and get it done without all the headache and, you know, all the issues that tend to come up, right? And that takes me to the next question I have. What are some of the typical issues and pitfalls that make these transactions fall apart or make the process very, very difficult or unpleasant, just outrightly unpleasant for a purchaser?
I mean, a number
of things. Yeah, one unpleasant thing at the very beginning is if the property is tenanted, and you know you're having a difficulty delivering vacant possession. So that can be an issue that can certainly drag on. So you want to ensure that from the get-go, the seller has issued a notice to quit, to remove the tenants, and so that they can deliver on their contract by saying that I'm granting you vacant possession.
Exactly. And some of the other problems is that the thing is that you have to make sure that you're prepared when you're going into a transaction like this. As we said earlier, sometimes the purchasers, for example, have problems completing, and I find that quite often the purchaser must ensure that they are ready before they actually enter into the contracts. Try to get pre-approval, you know, done, so you understand the landscape. Also, and I guess it emboldens your negotiating power. You know, I mean, you know what you're about. You know that you can pay certain price. You also know what you don't want to pay. You know, if for example, a very, very important issue I need to point out for people, especially Jamaicans who are living overseas, to do business in Jamaica. So if you're going to buy a property in Jamaica, before you do anything, get a TRN. Get a TRN.
That's a requirement.
It's a requirement to buy a property in Jamaica. That's how the stamp office will deal with you. That's how the stamp office identifies you. You have to have a TRN, and it's a very simple process. And we normally help people with getting TRNs. I mean, you know, I mean, there are sometimes delays at the stamp office. You know, I mean, and money touch on property not vacant when the contract provides for vacant possession. You know, a vendor, it's very important for a vendor to understand that he or she can, you know, open themselves up to a lawsuit if it is that the purchaser who is to pay a mortgage by a certain time is paying mortgage. And I see that all the while, Sasha. Purchasers are paying mortgage when tenants are in the place. And you know that there are certain laws in Jamaica that protects tenants. And the fact is, you can't just go and just kick out a tenant. You have to get an order from the court. And so sometimes I see tenants, people buy property for 4, 5, 6, 7 months. They have to live in people rent house and they can't go in the place.
Wow.
You know, I mean, delays in execution of the contract. Sometimes, as attorneys at law, we get people contract and we sit on them. You know, discuss it at the same time. In fact, my turnaround time is a week. You get a draft in a week because things can happen. Let me tell you, sometimes vendors will come into a transaction and they change their mind because people come with cash. The most attractive buyer is a cash buyer. And sometimes vendors will take less just so that they get the cash. So you know, move with the sort of requisite expedition, and you know that would prevent some of the delays, you know, going forward.
Absolutely. So you mentioned I've given our viewers today 2 excellent attorneys, but if for whatever reason someone is looking for an attorney, where should they go?
I mean, our general legal counsel in Jamaica has a list of attorneys, of competent attorneys. I'm sure all my colleagues are competent. There's a list at the general legal counsel site. And also, I mean, I guess I believe that they also can call the Jamaican Bar Association, and they'll be glad to refer.
Because we hear that complaint all the time that the attorney isn't moving on the transaction, like you said, or you have more troubling issues where the attorney hasn't released funds and things like that. So, you know, I think people need to know where to look outside of us, just in general. Don't just go to any attorney, you know, and I appreciate that recommendation that you should contact us first, of course, if you're looking for counsel, because I'm telling you, these are some of the best out there. And then outside of that, you know, just being objective, contact the general legal counsel that regulates attorneys, because I can tell you they're not going to recommend you to somebody who they know has a bunch of complaints against them or issues outstanding. They're going to try to recommend you to a quality person at the bar. Same thing with the Jamaica Bar Association as well. How do our listeners avoid becoming the victim of fraud?
Due diligence. You have to do, extreme excessive measures of due diligence is what I want to say. You can't do enough, you know. You want to view the land in person, go and see it. You know, don't take it for granted. Don't accept a phone call or anybody that's selling it. Go and see it in person. Walk on it. Walk the land. You know, get familiar with it. View the house in person, you know. Again, I go back to the surveyor's ID report. So crucial, so important. So that's another thing that's good. And you want to also get a copy of the title. You know, that's something that you can access from the National Land Agency website. Just to have a look at the title to ensure that the names correspond.
Yes.
So you don't want to have John Doe speaking to you selling, but it's Mary Sue who is, you know, so just make sure the names correspond. So crucial.
I think that you can take comfort in the fact that our titles office in Jamaica is where you can find everything about the property, especially when they buy registered land in Jamaica. Registered land in Jamaica are land that have a title, right? I mean, a lot of people get into problem when they buy unregistered land, and that's basically my experience. Because I've seen people buy land that they have never seen before, but they know that Mr. John has land when put up. The other thing is that sometimes they buy land that is a big lot of land, and somebody get a house back here, a house back there, a house back here, and the fact is that there are further processes that have to actually go on to ensure that a person can get a separate distinct piece. And not every land in Jamaica, for example, can be subdivided. You know, there are certain criteria that actually are important for land to be subdivided. You want to do it. Basically, you want to make sure that you are skeptical about everything. And there have been some very sad stories, especially with people in the diaspora, people in the UK, people in America, you know, where they take comfort in asking their cousin to do things or the auntie and you find that sometimes the cousin and the auntie then get sort of tied up in what is going on the ground. You know, just be a normal, regular buyer of land. Come and see the land yourself. Do your title search. Get an attorney involved, as I said, because that's one of the reasons you get an attorney involved. You almost that attorney has an obligation to you to ensure that, as far as possible, you're not the victim of fraud.
Right. And then I hear this question a lot, and I just, moving on from the fraud issue, but I hear the question a lot that I've been on this land for so long, so after a certain period of time, it now belongs to me. How does that work? What is that about? You know, can you just basically capture land and call it your own and expect that you have legal rights and title to that property?
Depends on who you actually came into possession of the land. You understand? There's definitely a right of adverse possession. We call it adverse possession in Jamaica, meaning that after a certain time in Jamaica, if the context is right, the property becomes yours. But you have to make an application to actually deem the property yours. But depends on how you actually enter into possession of the land in the first place. For example, you can't adversely possess property that was rented to you. So, for example, if you go into possession of the land with the consent and knowledge of the legal owner, then you can never adversely possess that property. So it depends on how you actually went in. Usually, people will abandon land in Jamaica. They go to foreign, and people sort of start to squatter the land or start to occupy the land to the exclusion of the paper owner, to the exclusion of the person who actually owns the land. And they do certain things. And if you do it for at least 12 years, do certain things for at least 12 years for private land, then you can actually make an application to own the land. For government land, though, is as far as 60 years. So the government land sort of, it's harder to acquire 60 years, and you have to come with your affidavits and evidence to prove that you have been acquiring, you have been possessing the art, living on the property to the exclusion of the owner, and treating the property as yours for the 12 years or the 60 years.
Okay. And if somebody comes back,
it's not just paying taxes. A lot of them come to my office and say they have been paying the taxes way more than paying the taxes.
Yeah, it's true.
It's way more than paying the taxes.
And if the owner, the rightful owner, comes back at any point within that 12 years, you have to start over, correct?
Yeah, and exercise ownership over the property, definitely have to start over.
Oh,
well, I don't know if you can start over because I don't know what's the state of the law. I'd have to look at that. But if you're aware that the owner come and the owner proves title and everything, that I don't know, that you can actually thereafter say that you don't know who the property belongs to or whatever. You know?
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. And title, what are the key things that our viewers should know about title and obtaining title, replacing title, duplicate titles? Let us know about that.
Well, certainly with an duplicate, and a duplicate is an original. You want, and if you have that in your possession, you want to keep it somewhere safe. Ideally in a safe deposit box, whether that is at a institution, or if you're keeping it copy at home, you want to have it in a box or a safe deposit box.
Are they a mattress? That's the best.
Not exactly. A mattress. But, so you want to have it somewhere that is fireproof, that is waterproof. And I can't, you want to also keep a photocopy of it. So if you have to show somebody or if you have to something with it, take the photocopy. Do not take out the original. Leave the original in the safety deposit box. Leave it somewhere safe. Take a photocopy.
Mm-hmm.
And also tell a trusted relative where you have deposited or where you have put the title, so that way it's not just you alone know where it is and you alone know the combination. Somebody you trust, somebody you highly regard, who knows where to locate it.
Absolutely. And then for we mentioned the probate and the estate. How do we actually get a copy of a title if we don't have it? If you don't have the original title, no one knows where it is. It's missing. Grandma hide it. She gone lose our mind. She don't know where the title is, and nobody can find it. What do we do to replace a title?
You can make an application to the titles office for lost title. There are certain things you have to prove, but you can make an application for lost title. You can actually explain to the titles office the last time you saw the title and in whose possession it was. You'll actually explain to the titles office whether or not there was a mortgagee involved, etc. And you can make an application. It's a process that is simple. Takes about 5 to 6 weeks to actually get the title in hand. But once you can prove certain things, then you'll be able to get a copy of the title. Remember, it's a duplicate system, so there's always one in the title, and there's always an original. Essentially you have two originals. One that the person owns the land has, and then there's another one, what we call a mirror principle, one in the title's office where it's exactly the same title. So you actually can make an application to replace the one that you have in, and the one that they have at title's office, you're never gonna get that one.
Okay. So, you know, we're coming very close to the end of the program. Thank you guys for sharing. I have one basically last question to touch on. You know, what's your forecast for the Jamaican real estate market? How do you feel? Are we bearish? Are we bullish? What, you know, should people really be looking to buy in Jamaica right now?
Yes. A strong, loud yes.
Yes.
I mean, the market is doing exceedingly well. I mean, you would think that what is happening over the world would be affecting real estate. It's quite the opposite, and I'm so pleased and happy to see my island doing so well. But yes, a lot of people are looking to purchase, whether it's condos, villas, or housing there. A lot of diaspora, they want to buy land to start building. So yes, it is doing extremely well, and I hope it will continue to exceed expectations.
I will answer this question, that question by this illustration. I went to look at a property for our client last week, Tuesday, the foot of Stony Hill, of course, a very well sought after area. And the real estate agent told me that she was overwhelmed. There were at least 57 people that turned up to view the property. 57 people. And the other thing is that you find that people are into development and stuff like that. They're buying. There are certain areas that they're trying to buy out. Like, for example, the Haven Dales, the Meadowbrooks, and the building, the gated communities and stuff like that. So it's booming. Construction is booming in Jamaica. Everybody wants a piece of the proper piece of the rock. And I mean, there's not enough, you know, property to go around in terms of, you know, in the sought and not so sought after areas. I mean, people are buying. That's my experience.
And then, so that leads me to another issue, because you mentioned construction, because you've heard so many times the stories of people sending money to relatives to construct, build, add on, and then when they actually get on the ground, there's nothing there. If you are looking to really build in Jamaica, where can we find reputable construction companies or to help us with the process outside of our uncle who's been a farmer whose whole life who says I can build it, and then we don't have quality work, you know, and you not being on the ground, you don't have that reliability. What are the tips there that you have for our viewers today?
Well, you want to get access to a list of approved builders or contractors. That is something that you can access on the Diaspora website. I believe they're providing a list of approved architects and contractors with which you can feel comfortable working with.
Good. That's good to know. So that's a resource for you guys out there listening. Please don't rely on people who are not skilled tradespeople to construct your property. There are a lot and a growing number of very, very reputable contractors in Jamaica that you can work with, that you can give them your money and feel secure that you're using a reputable business and not just a one man here who gets in the community crew together. And sometimes that works out for some people, but truthfully, for most of the cases, you'd end up being not satisfied with the outcome. So if you're just... Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm looking at my notes here. There's another tip that I think is very important, especially for people in the diaspora. Sometimes the TRN needs to be updated. So, for example, if you go overseas and you get married and you had a TRN from before, before leaving Jamaica, then you have to sort of update the TRN records to ensure that the name that is you're going to buy the property in, say, I know, Sasha Watson Sankley, it has to be reflecting on your TRN. In other words, to buy the property in that name, in your married name.
Great. Any other tips, tricks, advice? If you are listening, now is the open time. Questions and answers. If you're on, we want to answer your questions. I'll leave it open for a quick minute while they give us some tips. But send in your questions and we'll try to get them answered on air today. If not, you do know how to reach us. HAWM, it's 407-802-3223. That's 407-802-3223. You can reach us on all the social media outlets at Harm Law. That's how you can reach us for a consultation. We will put you in contact with these very high quality attorneys that will definitely take care of you, and you can trust and rely that they will give you peace of mind in your Jamaican financing, conveyancing, and real estate transactions, because that's what this is about, is making sure that you get the legal help that you need and you deserve. So just one more time, Courtney, tell me what's your number, shout it out there for our listeners to be able to contact you directly, and then you, Monique, after.
876 is the area code. I'm in Jamaica. 853-6587. That's 853-6587. And you can reach me either by straight call or WhatsApp.
So.
All right. And I am in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. And my telephone number is 954-610-1429.
All right. Well, that's it for today. I didn't see any questions pop up on the chat here. So I thank you guys for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules and your Saturday morning where you should be relaxing to help educate our viewers. We really, really appreciate it. This video will be available on all the different outlets after today. So if you didn't tune in live, share it, like it, send it out, because this is information that you needed to know, absolutely needed to know on what to do if you're buying or selling real estate in Jamaica. So thank you very much for tuning in. We look forward to the next live, which comes up on May 6th. That's going to be Alicia, and we're going to be talking about the anti-riot bill, right? That's just went into law in Florida, what you can do to protect your rights if you are protesting. Tuning for that next Friday. All right.